Transcendentalism. What is it? To completely grasp this concept, we need to first understand the word. Where does it come from? The word transcendentalism comes from the Latin word transcendere, which translates to climb over or beyond. The term transcendental was first introduced in 1788 in the Critique of Pure Reason by a Prussian philosopher named Immanuel Kant. In his work he wrote, "I call all knowledge transcendental, which is occupied not so much with objects as with our a priori concept of objects." Transcendentalism was an American literary, political, and philosophical movement that began in the early 19th century. This movement was an objection to the prevailing rationalist thinking encouraged during the American Enlightenment and Revolution. The Transcendentalists were highly dissatisfied by the strict religions like Calvinism and Puritanism that had existed before this time. Transcendentalism was connected to Unitarianism, which was the prevalent religion in Boston at the time. Originating at Harvard University, this movement was an offshoot of the fading Unitarian movement with a slightly different philosophy. The foremost preacher of Unitarianism in the 19th century was William Ellery Channing. The Unitarians believed that humans should dedicate their lives to strive to become like God. Although they respected Channing's philosophy, the Transcendentalists were more influenced by a Scottish philosopher named David Hume and his idea that there could never be a complete and practical proof of the existence of God. To counteract the belief in the rational and empirical that had been rising over the years, the Transcendentalists decided to embrace the power of literature. Transcendentalism is not a religion, but rather a philosophy, which was inspired by a number of others, including Romanticism, German idealist philosophy, and Hinduism. The primary belief of Transcendentalists was that the intuitive is superior to the rational. The philosophy emphasized that an individual has a spiritual understanding of the world and the people that is beyond its senses. It emphasized that an individual can connect with nature through the soul and inner spirit. The Transcendentalist philosophy consists of multiple propositions and beliefs. Let's take a look at these beliefs one by one. The individual contains all answers to the universe, as it is the spiritual center. It does not undermine the existence of a God. Instead, it defines the individual as the supreme being in the universe that we know. The individual has an understanding of the universe, God, and nature that transcends the senses and the empirical. All pieces of the individual correspond to pieces of the universe, and the arrangement of the universe and the individual are identical. This is the premise for the idea that to understand the universe, you must first understand yourself.
Nature is a symbolic enigma. Everything in nature is an allegory and represents something else of great importance. Happiness can only be achieved by self-realization. Self-realization is achieved by simultaneously becoming one with the universe and acknowledging your own existence. So who were the Transcendentalists? They were authors whose literature was centered around their main beliefs, which involved spiritual discovery and nature. Let's begin with one of the most prominent authors of the movement, Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was the son of a highly conservative Unitarian minister. He went on to graduate from Harvard and later studied at the Harvard Divinity School. Emerson married Lydia Jackson in 1835 and got settled in Concord with 4 children. On September 8th, 1836, Emerson, Henry Hedge, George Putnam, and George Ripley met at Willard's Hotel in Cambridge to plan a periodic gathering. These meetings came to be known as the Transcendental Club. Emerson contributed immensely in these meetings and to the movement as a whole. Emerson's house was always filled with friends that stayed over for up to many months. With Bronson Alcott, George Ripley, and Margaret Fuller, he started a magazine called The Dial in 1840. His most famous works include his lectures, which were published as essays. Some of these were Self-Reliance, The American Scholar, Friendship, Experience, and Nature, was acted as a catalyzer in spreading this movement. Here is an excerpt from Nature. To go into solitude, a man needs to retire as much from his chamber as from society. I am not solitary whilst I read and write, though nobody is with me. But if a man would be alone, let him look at the stars. The rays that come from those heavenly worlds will separate him and what he touches. One might think the atmosphere was made transparent with this design, to give man in the heavenly bodies a perpetual presence of the sublime. Seen in the streets of cities, how great they are. If the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, How would men believe and adore, and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God, which had been shown? But every night come out these envoys of beauty and light, the universe with their admonishing smile. Emerson wants everyone to appreciate nature and the beauty of the stars. He wants you to leave your house and society and enter the world of nature completely alone. He wants everyone to admire the magnificence and splendor of the stars as if they appear once in 1,000 years.
Another prominent author during the Transcendentalist movement and a student of Emerson was Henry David Thoreau. His most important works include Walden and Civil Disobedience. For 2 years, Thoreau went to go live in the woods, and he had multiple motives for doing this. Near the pond, he found a quiet place to write. This is where he wrote A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers and a draft of Walden. Another reason he went to live by the pond was to think. He wanted to think about life and the reason for living. He wanted to appreciate the beauty of nature and live life to its absolute fullest. He felt that our lives were too complicated and that simplifying them would help deduce the meaning of life. Here's a quote from Walden that exemplifies this. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life, living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its slowest terms. Walt Whitman was another notable author of this movement. He was a poet, essayist, and journalist. Among his most popular works are Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself, and Drum Taps. Here are a few lines from Song of Myself. I celebrate myself, and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Houses and rooms are full of perfume, the shelves are crowded with perfumes. I breathe the fragrance myself, and know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it. The atmosphere is not a perfume, it has no taste of the distillation, it is odorless. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. In Song of Myself, Whitman elucidates the importance of the individual and says that we are all the same. He celebrates himself and portrays his love for the individual. Whitman also says that all the people in society crowd the world, but he wants to keep his individuality. Nature and the atmosphere are not affected by people and the feelings of society, and he wants to indulge into the comfort and freedom that nature provides. Other notable figures and authors of Transcendentalism include Theodore Parker, Margaret Fuller, and Amos Bronson Alcott. Overall, Transcendentalism was a philosophy that broke away from all of the dominant religions and beliefs of and before the early 19th century. It gave the authors a sense of freedom from society, which is what they wrote about. The Transcendentalists believed in the inherent goodness of the human being, unlike the religions that had existed before it. The American Revolution and Enlightenment promoted the scientific method and empirical thinking, while Transcendentalism advocated for intuition. Simply put, Transcendentalism was another American religious revolution that was born to combat the existing ideologies.